boy, what the hell was even that? Well, Martha is Dead is a game that I have discovered by chance. I heard shortly before it was released that the PlayStation version of this game had to be changed because of some disturbing imagery that Sony didn't want to show. Yeah, the guys who allow games like Mortal Kombat and Postal 4, for example, on their platform, or Manhunt and GTA 5 back in the day, and have themselves released games like God of War, which, especially in the older parts, was brutal. Yeah, Sony had an issue with what is shown here. There is a face being cut off that was removed, and some other scenes it seems like implying masturbation, which I'm not even sure where this was supposed to be. But just being violent is not something that is that interesting. The premise itself caught my interest. It's set at the end of World War II in Italy and is supposed to show the horrors of war in fascist Italy and mental health issues including trauma, schizophrenia and others. Presented as a walking simulator, the game is supposed to focus completely on the story. And that is unfortunately a mixed bag. There are great walking simulators, some mixed with horror, and some being a hybrid between walking simulator and survival horror. There are also some that are more okay, like Vanishing of Ethan Carter or What Remains of Edith Finch. This here unfortunately misses the mark hard. After an interesting start that shows Martha dying and Julia taking her identity for some reason, she pretends to be mute like her sister and gets into contact with the local resistance. We mainly shoot pictures with her camera and also try to learn what happened to Martha. Who killed her and why, and if something supernatural is going on here. But there is also a lot of dicking around. There is a lot going on that is not that important, but kind of okay. We have to read the newspaper every day and see what is happening nearby, from the Allies coming closer, or the news of Martha's death that is important not only because she is a young woman that died, but because her father is a German general or officer. We have nightmares in which we run towards words and try to find the correct sentence. Soon we also get a bike, which baffled me to be honest, because the game is pretty low budget and I had to think of Lucius, which had a tricycle in a mansion, which already was a dumb idea, and then it was also poorly implemented, having no slow start or slow down, but always driving at the same speed. This here also was a terrible idea. The bicycle is weirdly implemented. It looks like Julia is hunching over the bike in a really weird way, and most of the area is made of forest area and rough terrain, but with the bike you are usually getting stuck somewhere, to the point that you also can't get off it. The game also doesn't look that good and performance is all over the place. When a day starts it usually goes down into the single digits, FPS wise, until everything is loaded in. There is screen tearing, the FPS fluctuate, often making the characters look somewhere completely different when you are turning around or running because of micro stutters. And the story feels pretty fractured, as if they added all the unnecessary scenes first, but then couldn't finish some of the main story parts. I will talk spoilers now next, because I also have issues with the story. The game kind of lulls you into a kind of boredom with and pretty unengaging story for most of the time, only to have some shocking, disturbing scenes to gross you out. While the first scene with the face being cut off kind of makes sense, as Julia has nightmares and takes the identity of her sister, we basically see this metaphorically in that nightmare scene. The question, as with the other shocking scenes though, is, does it have to be this graphic? Because it's more distracting and trying to gross you out than actually be metaphorical. Anyway, soon after we also see a resistance fighter having his legs blown off after stepping on a landmine, which I at first didn't even get really, because there was shooting going on and then we find him just with his legs blown off. But then later on, when I already thought of turning off the game because it was getting too boring, it gets even much worse. You see, Martha is obviously pregnant when we find her corpse, but that isn't enough it seems. For no real reason, Julia cuts open her dead sister in graphic detail to pull out a fetus. I mean, sure, this is most likely another metaphor for her sister, as the fetus has two heads or alludes to split personalities, as there are some hints about this as well, But did we really need a scene like this? You just get tonal whiplash from this crap. And the other following scenes are even more poorly handled. We hear Julia often referring to her mother as kind of a monster at some point, but we don't really interact with her. But then we get a couple of scenes that are retelling Julia's past with her mother. We see horrific domestic abuse, like her being beaten up, being bound to a chair, and her dog being killed and fed to her. There's no real setup to this, and we get all these horrific scenes in a row. It just feels like misery porn at this point. Also, Julia is making some very childish noises while telling these stories, which makes the whole thing just seem more fucked up and weird and out of place. In the end, we also don't get clear answers. Instead, we just get some horrible scenes, like Julia killing and chopping off her mother, and eventually getting to the church to be brought to the asylum, where at this point, yeah, she definitely belongs there. While this happens, she thinks about what happened to her throughout the game, who was real and who died, only to slit her wrists and then wake up at a later point and tell us that she is better now. Funnily enough, that last scene has a trigger warning, and you can play it in a censored form, meaning the self-harm part. It's really weird that after all what happened, you can decide to choose a softer version there. Doesn't really make much sense to me, and as this is dealing with mental health issues in general, why was there only a trigger warning for this scene and softer version? At this point we have seen horrific domestic violence, an obvious psychotic person killing and chopping off her mother, most probably cutting open her sister and getting out her fetus. I mean, it's weird that they draw the line here. But like most of the game, the ending was disappointing as well, so it lets you even down in the end once again. Martha is Dead was a disappointment. The story feels rushed and not that well told. The gameplay is too boring. You can follow side plots, but you are usually cut off at some point and can only continue later without any real understanding when you can continue and why. Plotlines that feel more pressing are stopped at some point and only followed later, which is weird and takes you out of the plotline. They can also be cut off completely, it seems, at least it felt to me like that at one point. It is also confusing at times that you want to do one thing but are then stopped and don't know if you can continue. The interactions with the world are also odd and very limited, and there is a big emphasis on the camera. But then at a certain point it's not really used anymore, and you get so many adjustments for the camera that you hardly use. At least I didn't. And the whole camera mechanic is also not that much fun and very repetitive, as you have to develop and print every picture, and it's always the same process. It's a game that had potential, at least I thought so, but it doesn't live up to it for the most part. Martha is Dead gets a 4 out of 10. And seeing how poor this one went, I decided to give another walking simulator / survival horror game a chance. This one is supposed to be not that great either though, but I wanted to give it a try. It could just be better than Martha is Dead. So, Amnesia, huh? It took me a while to check out the first game, even though a couple of years ago it was just getting handed out for free over and over. I of course got it at the time, as life doesn't offer you a lot of presents or good things, but I hesitated to play it. For a pretty silly reason actually, as I used to have the most obnoxious people in school sing the praises of this game. They also had a terrible taste, but eventually I decided to check it out with an open mind and not taking into the account the opinions of these pieces of shit that talked highly about it. Those who had also a very bad taste, as I already said. And as it turned out, I actually liked the original game. Amnesia: The Dark Descent was a nice surprise. A kind of elegant gothic horror tale about a man in the 19th century who lost his memory and stumbles through an old castle in which monsters lurked. You also find a lot of notes and documents while searching the castle, which reminded me a lot of the original Bram Stoker's Dracula novel, which is told mostly by letters. I liked it. I recommend it. It took me even longer to check out the sequel though, as I heard it was a letdown, and your ominous title Amnesia, a machine for pigs, is actually referring to the pigs that you encounter in the game. But after Martha is dead, I wanted to check it out. I thought it would be something that would be at least a little bit better and not try to be shocking just for shock's sake. So I started a machine for pigs. We wake up without memory in a big manner. We were put in a cage and only know that we are missing our children. We also soon learn that we are menders, and an ominous voice is guiding us and lures us deeper and deeper into some kind of underground facility, as it promises us to give us answers and especially bring us back to our children. And as we get closer and closer to the bottom of the facility and repair some parts of it that have been broken, we see more and more disfigured pig-human monsters stumbling and lurking in the shadows. There are a couple of twists and turns, but the story isn't told that well in parts and just goes so wild and weird that it simply doesn't work, at least for me. It was ambitious for sure, but breaks under its own weight. And while there are some things that work surprisingly well, like the man-pigs attacking a city that looks like London, or maybe is London, others don't work that well and just feel lackluster. Also, the man-pigs look kind of creepy when they are in the dark and they are not in their full size. But seeing them in the light is not exactly scary, but more like a ridiculous idea of a big deformed pigman, which they are. Having later on pigs with electric exoskeletons and invisible pigs were just too ridiculous for me. The ending was a letdown as well, and after almost 4 hours you will be done with it. The environments are also not that varied, but they at least tried, and the game is short enough to not overstay its welcome in that department. At first you are in the manor, then you get into some kind of tunnels and eventually into the machine itself. So they at least try to be somewhat varied. You also go at least at one point into the city and see the attack and chaos when the man-pigs attack. There is also some kind of steampunk-ish environment and style in the whole area, and especially in the machine itself. But that's more or less it. Gameplay-wise, there are also no surprises. You solve simple puzzles most of the time, being easily understandable, only a few are not clearly communicated to the player. You can crouch, hold a gas lamp with infinite gas, run, open doors, and pick up certain objects. You can't properly fight, and if there are enemies, you have to hide in the dark. This is very easy though, and even though I played the original game a couple of years ago, I think it was more tense there. And the level design was better. You also don't have the madness mechanic anymore, you just get dizzy at times. That's all. A Machine for Pigs was not great, but it's also not outright bad. At times I thought it would be decent, but the ending put it down a bit. It was close to be fine, but misses the mark in the end. It's still much better than Martha is Dead though. And Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs, gets a 6 out of 10.